I was sitting at the nurse's station in the hospital, scrolling through patient files when my phone chimed. It wasn't unusual for me to get messages during my shift, patients' families calling with updates or friends checking in. But something about this one felt different. A photo popped up on my screen and I froze. There she was. Amanda, my stepsister, wearing a designer wedding dress that I instantly recognized. It wasn't just any dress. It was the same style my mom and I had admired years ago in a bridal magazine before cancer took her from me. The caption underneath read, asterisk, "Doesn't she look perfect?" Asterisk followed by another message from my stepmother, Diana. Asterisk, "Your mother's savings paid for the most beautiful wedding. Everything Amanda deserves." Asterisk. My hands didn't shake as I stared at the screen. My voice stayed steady as I finished my rounds and checked on my patients. If anyone looked closely enough, they might have noticed the slight tightening around my eyes, the only sign that my world had just been shattered. My name is Olivia Chin. And at 29, I just discovered that my stepmother had stolen my mother's life savings. Money that was supposed to be protected by an ironclad will. But while Diana was probably gloating over what she thought was her ultimate victory, imagining me sobbing at my nurse's station, I felt an odd sense of calm. Because there was one crucial detail she'd overlooked. The memory came back to me like it happened yesterday. I was 21, sitting in Mom's study 2 months before she passed away. She was frail but sharp as ever, patting the seat beside her desk. "Olivia, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We need to talk about what happens after." "Mom, please," I protested, but she shook her head. "No arguments. I need you to understand something important about the will, about your father," she continued. Her words were deliberate, measured. She knew exactly what she was doing. And now, 8 years later, I finally understood why. Another buzz interrupted my thoughts. Another photo. This time, Amanda stood next to an ice sculpture so elaborate it probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Diana's caption read, asterisk, "The reception is like a fairy tale. Though I suppose you wouldn't know, being too busy with your noble nursing career to attend." Asterisk. I could picture Diana smugly typing out those words, sitting in her designer outfit at the head table, basking in the admiration of guests who had no idea where the money really came from. My dad was probably there too, nodding along, letting himself believe this was what Mom would have wanted. But Mom had known better. She'd seen exactly what Diana was capable of. As soon as my shift ended, I dialed Marcus Thorne's number. Not the family lawyer. That man had long since been bought off by Diana. But Marcus, the attorney Mom had secretly hired during her final months. "It's time," I said when he answered. Diana used Mom's savings for Amanda's wedding. She finally did exactly what Mom predicted she would. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus replied, his voice steady. "I'll file the papers first thing tomorrow. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no going back." Was I sure? Oh, I was sure. I thought about the past 8 years since Mom died. The constant undermining, the subtle digs about my career choice, the way Diana systematically turned my father against me. She convinced him that becoming a nurse instead of joining his medical practice was a betrayal of Mom's memory. But it wasn't. It was the fulfillment of everything Mom believed in. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Mom knew this day would come. That's why she prepared for it." After hanging up, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, letting the weight of everything wash over me. Diana had entered our lives like a whirlwind just a year after Mom died, when Dad was still lost in his grief. At first, she seemed perfect, a sophisticated pharmaceutical sales rep who understood the medical world Dad lived in, with a daughter close to my age. "We'll be a family again," Dad had said at their wedding, squeezing my hand as if trying to convince himself as much as me. At the time I was 22, just starting nursing school, determined to honor Mom's memory by following my heart instead of Dad's expectations. But Diana's true nature emerged slowly but steadily. First came the subtle comments about how some people weren't cut out for the pressures of being a real doctor. Then the constant comparisons between me and Amanda, how she was pursuing a proper medical degree, how she understood the importance of upholding the family's reputation. The final straw came 3 years ago when Diana convinced Dad to remove me from my position at his private practice. The job I'd reluctantly taken to maintain some connection with him became yet another casualty of her manipulation. "It's for the best," she'd said with fake sympathy. The other doctors were complaining about having a mere nurse in such a prominent role. "It was embarrassing for your father." So I transferred to the hospital, throwing myself into emergency medicine where I knew I could make a real difference. But the distance between Dad and me grew wider with each passing year, carefully cultivated by Diana's manipulations. My phone buzzed again. Another wedding photo. This time Dad was giving a toast, his eyes suspiciously bright. The caption read, "such a touching speech about his real daughter." That was Diana's favorite weapon. The constant reminder that I wasn't really part of their family anymore. That Amanda was the daughter Dad deserved, following in his footsteps while I chose a lesser path. What Diana didn't know was that Mom had seen this coming. In those final months, as the cancer ate away at her body but left her mind razor-sharp, she prepared for exactly this scenario. "Your father is a brilliant doctor," she told me once, "but he's always been naive about people's intentions. Diana will try to take everything, not just the money but your place in his heart. She'll wait until she thinks she's won, until she's so confident that she gets careless. That's when you'll need to be ready." I pulled out the sealed envelope Mom had given me that day. The one I'd kept safe all these years, waiting for exactly this moment. Inside was a letter, its contents seared into my memory even though I'd only read it once. "My dearest Olivia. If you're reading this, it means Diana has finally shown her true colors. The savings account she thinks contains my entire estate is actually only a small portion of what I've set aside for you. The real inheritance, everything I built during my years running the hospital's nursing program, is held in a trust that only activates under specific conditions." I touched the paper gently, feeling closer to Mom than I had in years. She'd built her career from nothing, working her way up from staff nurse to director of nursing education at one of the country's top hospitals. Dad had never quite understood why she'd chosen to stay in nursing rather than pursue a medical degree, just as he'd never quite understood my similar choice. But Mom had understood something fundamental about both healing and human nature. She'd known that Diana would eventually overplay her hand, too confident in her own cleverness to imagine she might be outsmarted by a woman she dismissed as just a nurse. Starting my car, I headed not home but to the small coffee shop where I was meeting Marcus. It was time to put Mom's plan into action. Diana thought she'd scored the ultimate victory using Mom's money to fund her daughter's fairytale wedding. She had no idea she just triggered exactly the scenario Mom had planned for. The coffee shop was quiet at this hour, most of the afterwork crowd already gone. Marcus was waiting in a corner booth, a thick folder on the table in front of him. He stood as I approached, his expression sympathetic but determined. "I pulled all the documentation," he said as I sat down. "Everything's in order, just as your mother arranged it. Would you like to review it before we proceed?" I nodded, accepting the folder with steady hands. Inside was the evidence of Mom's true legacy. Not just the savings Diana had stolen, but the entire network of investments, properties, and educational endowments she'd built over decades of careful planning. "Diana accessed the savings account last month," Marcus explained, pointing to a bank statement. "Withdrew everything to pay for the wedding. She forged your father's signature on the transfer documents, not that he would have stopped her if she'd asked. And that triggers the trust conditions." Marcus nodded. "Any unauthorized access to the decoy account automatically activates the main trust. Your mother was very specific about this. She wanted to give Diana enough rope to hang herself, so to speak." I thought about Diana's smug messages, her certainty that she'd finally proven her daughter's superiority over me. "What happens next?" "First, we file these papers with the probate court," Marcus explained, pulling out another document. "This evidence shows that Diana not only accessed the account fraudulently, but also violated the specific terms of your mother's will regarding the use of those funds. That triggers a review of all estate matters, including the existence of the primary trust." "And Dad?" I asked quietly. Marcus's expression softened. "Your mother provided for that too. There's a letter for him explaining everything. She hoped that seeing Diana's true colors would finally open his eyes." I stared into my untouched coffee, watching the steam rise and dissipate. Part of me wished there was another way, that we could resolve this without shattering what remained of my family. But Diana had made her choice, and in doing so, she'd proven Mom right about everything. "Do it," I said firmly. "File the papers." It's time Diana learned that being just a nurse doesn't mean being naive. As I left the coffee shop, my phone buzzed one final time. Another message from Diana. This one showing Amanda cutting the massive wedding cake. Asterisk perfect end to a perfect day. Your mother's money well spent. Asterisk. I smiled slightly, thinking of Mom's voice. Asterisk sometimes, sweetheart, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about being patient enough to let someone's own actions reveal their true nature. Asterisk. Diana had no idea. But her perfect day was about to become the beginning of her biggest nightmare. The days following Diana's exposure felt like stepping into uncharted territory. For 8 years I'd lived under the shadow of her manipulation, tiptoeing around her carefully constructed facade, while trying to maintain some semblance of my own identity. But now, with the truth laid bare and Diana stripped of her power, everything began to shift, not just for me but for everyone involved. Dad was the first to surprise me. After years of being emotionally distant, he suddenly became almost painfully present. He called every day, sometimes multiple times, checking in on how I was doing or asking about the scholarship fund. At first, I thought it was guilt driving him. Guilt over letting Diana isolate him. Guilt over not seeing through her lies sooner. But as the weeks passed, I realized it was something deeper. It was regret. Not just for what he'd allowed to happen, but for losing so much time with me. Your mother always said you had her strength, he told me one evening during one of our late-night phone calls. I didn't understand what she meant until now. I wanted to tell him that Mom's strength hadn't been about tearing people down. It was about lifting them up, even when they made mistakes. But instead I simply said, she believed in second chances. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Dad replied. Then maybe it's time I start believing in them too. Meanwhile, Amanda's transformation continued to unfold in ways I never expected. After that day at the cafe, when she'd confronted Diana and vowed to repay the stolen scholarship money, she threw herself into making amends. She sold her engagement ring, a massive diamond that had once symbolized everything Diana valued, and donated the proceeds to the fund. Then she enrolled in nursing school, determined to understand the path she'd once dismissed as inferior. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of her sudden change of heart. Was this genuine or just another attempt to win approval? But as we spent more time together, shadowing each other at the hospital, working side by side on the scholarship committee, I began to see glimpses of the person Mom had hoped Amanda could become. Beneath the polished exterior crafted by Diana was someone who genuinely cared about helping others, someone who had been stifled by years of her mother's toxic influence. You know, Amanda said one afternoon as we sorted through applications for the next round of scholarships, Mom always told me that nurses were less important, less intelligent, less worthy of respect. But now I get why she said those things. She was afraid, I replied without looking up from the stack of papers in front of me. Afraid that if you saw the value in nursing, you might start questioning everything else she taught you. Amanda nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. And now I'm questioning everything. While Amanda and Dad worked to rebuild their lives, Diana's world crumbled around her. The legal proceedings moved quickly once the forensic audit revealed the full extent of her financial fraud. Offshore accounts, falsified documents, unauthorized transfers. It all painted a damning picture of greed and manipulation. In the end, she accepted a plea deal. Full restitution of everything she'd stolen, plus a permanent ban from any involvement in medical or charitable organizations. Last I heard, she'd moved to Arizona, her carefully constructed image shattered. Some part of me felt sorry for her, not because of what she'd lost, but because she'd never truly understood what Mom had tried to teach her. That real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or designer dresses, but in the connections we build and the legacies we leave behind. Still, her absence was a relief. Without her constant presence poisoning every interaction, the air seemed clearer, lighter. For the first time in years, I felt free to breathe. But freedom came with its own challenges. With Diana out of the picture, the responsibility of managing Mom's legacy fell squarely on my shoulders. The trust fund was fully restored, thanks to Diana's restitution. But that was only the beginning. There were properties to oversee, investments to manage, programs to expand. And then there was the emotional weight of it all. The knowledge that Mom had entrusted me with this enormous task because she believed I was strong enough to carry it. Some nights, lying awake in bed, I wondered if she'd underestimated me. Could I really live up to her expectations? Did I have the wisdom, the patience, the foresight to honor everything she'd built? It was during one of these restless nights that I found myself standing in Mom's old study, staring at the wall where her nursing diploma had once hung. The frame was gone now, replaced by a plaque commemorating the newly renamed Catherine Mitchell Memorial Hall. But behind it, tucked into the corner of the bookshelf, was an envelope I hadn't noticed before. Inside was another letter dated just days before Mom died. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places, but her words were as clear as ever. My dearest Olivia, it began *, if you're reading this, then everything has played out as I feared it might. Diana's true nature has been revealed, and you've had to be stronger than any daughter should need to be. But I hope you've also discovered something else. *. Tears blurred my vision as I read on. Mom wrote about the importance of creating space for others to grow, of choosing healing over destruction, of trusting in the quiet voices that often have the most important things to say. She reminded me of why I'd chosen nursing, not because it was easy but because it was meaningful. And she reassured me that the safeguards she'd put in place weren't meant to control me, but to support me. Even after I'm gone, she wrote, *, I will find a way to help you fight the battles that need fighting. *. By the time I finished reading, my cheeks were wet with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of gratitude. Because in that moment I understood something profound. Mom hadn't left me alone. She'd given me everything I needed to carry on her legacy. Not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. The next morning I arrived at the hospital early, eager to dive back into work. Between managing the scholarship fund, mentoring new nurses, and caring for patients, my schedule was busier than ever. But for the first time in years I didn't feel overwhelmed. Instead, I felt purposeful. As I walked through the halls, I couldn't help but notice how much had changed. Not just in my own life, but in the lives of those around me. Dad was reconnecting with old colleagues, rediscovering the joy of collaboration and shared purpose. Amanda was thriving in nursing school, her natural empathy shining through in every patient interaction. Even the scholarship recipients were blossoming, their dreams fueled by the opportunities Mom's fund provided. And then there was me, standing in the middle of it all, carrying Mom's torch, building on the foundation she'd laid. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the weight of responsibility threatened to crush me. But I knew I wasn't alone. Mom's voice was always there, guiding me, reminding me of why this work mattered. That afternoon, as I sat in a meeting with the hospital board to discuss expanding the scholarship program, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Amanda. *, can we talk? It's important. *. I excused myself from the meeting and stepped into the hallway. Amanda stood at the end of the corridor, her expression serious. For a moment I worried that she'd changed her mind, that the pressure of living up to Mom's expectations had become too much. "What is it?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then held out a folded piece of paper. "I found this in one of Mom's old journals," she said. "I think you should read it." I unfolded the paper and scanned the contents. It was a list, a long detailed inventory of every asset, every investment, every property Mom had acquired over the years. Beside each item was a note explaining its purpose: funding for nursing scholarships, grants for medical research, resources for underserved communities. At the bottom of the page, in Mom's unmistakable handwriting, was a single sentence: "True strength isn't about taking, it's about giving." I looked up at Amanda, my throat tight with emotion. "Where did you find this?" "In the storage unit where Mom kept her things," she replied. "I thought it might help with whatever comes next." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached out and hugged her, holding her close as the weight of Mom's legacy settled over us both. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about justice. It was about building something lasting, something that would continue to heal and uplift long after we were gone. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to take on the challenge. The weeks that followed Amanda's decision to shadow me at the hospital felt like the beginning of something new. Not just for her, but for all of us. With Diana out of the picture, the air seemed lighter, freer, as if we were finally able to breathe without the weight of her manipulations pressing down on us. But it wasn't just about moving on from her influence. It was about rebuilding what she had tried so hard to destroy. Amanda started showing up at the hospital every evening after her nursing classes, eager to learn and observe. At first, I wasn't sure how to handle her presence. She was still my stepsister, the daughter of the woman who had stolen from Mom's legacy, but she was also someone trying to make amends in her own way. Watching her interact with patients, I began to see glimpses of the person Mom had hoped she could become. Compassionate, curious, and genuinely interested in helping others. One night, as we finished rounds together, Amanda turned to me with a hesitant smile. "I never realized how much nurses do," she admitted. "It's not just about following doctors' orders, it's about being there. Really being there. When people need you most." Her words caught me off guard, not because they were profound but because they mirrored exactly what Mom had always believed. That healing wasn't just about procedures or prescriptions. It was about connection, about showing up in someone's darkest moments and saying, "You're not alone." "I think Mom would have liked hearing you say that," I replied softly. Amanda's expression softened, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Do you think she'd be proud of me? Even after everything?" "She already is," I said without hesitation. "She saw more than you realize, Amanda. She knew you weren't just a product of Diana's influence. She believed you could choose a different path, if you wanted to." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Amanda nodded, her resolve strengthening. "I want to," she said firmly. "I want to make things right." Meanwhile, Dad continued to rebuild his life, slowly reconnecting with the parts of himself he'd lost under Diana's control. He started attending medical conferences again, rekindling old friendships and collaborations. It was as if, without her constant interference, he was remembering who he used to be before grief and loneliness made him vulnerable to her schemes. "You know," he told me one evening over dinner, "your mother always said I had a gift for bringing people together. I didn't understand what she meant until now." I smiled, thinking of all the times Mom had quietly orchestrated gatherings, dinners, and events that brought our family closer. She'd understood something fundamental about human nature. That connection heals, even when words fail. Mom believed in second chances, I reminded him. For everyone, including herself. Dad nodded thoughtfully, his gaze drifting toward the photo of Mom that sat on the dining table. "She left us more than money, Olivia. She left us a roadmap, a way to move forward, even when the road feels impossible." As the months passed, the Catherine Mitchell Memorial Hall became a hub of activity. The scholarship program expanded, thanks to Amanda's efforts and the Restored Trust Fund. We hosted workshops, mentorship sessions, and networking events for aspiring nurses, creating opportunities for them to connect with professionals in the field. Each event felt like another step toward fulfilling Mom's vision. A community built on compassion, collaboration, and mutual support. But it wasn't just about the scholarships. It was about fostering a culture of care, one that extended beyond the hospital walls and into the lives of those we touched. Patients became advocates, recipients became mentors, and through it all, Mom's legacy grew stronger, more vibrant than ever before. Still, there were moments when the past lingered, casting shadows over our progress. One afternoon, as I sorted through applications for the next round of scholarships, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "You think you've won, don't you? Taking everything away from me, ruining my life. But mark my words, Olivia. This isn't over." I stared at the message, my stomach tightening. It was Diana, of course. Despite the legal restrictions placed on her, she'd found a way to reach out, to remind me that she wasn't ready to let go of her grudge. For a moment, anger flared inside me. How dare she? After everything she'd done, after all the pain she'd caused, she still couldn't accept responsibility for her actions. But then I remembered Mom's letter, the one hidden behind her nursing diploma, and the words she'd written about forgiveness. "Leave time to forgive," she'd said. "Not because the other person deserves it, but because holding on to anger only weighs you down. It keeps you trapped in the past, unable to fully embrace the future. I deleted the message without responding. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to know when to walk away. That evening, I met Amanda at the hospital cafe. She looked exhausted but determined, her textbook spread across the table as she studied for an upcoming exam. "How's it going?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "It's challenging," she admitted with a wry smile. "But in a good way. I'm starting to understand why you chose this path. It's not just about the skills or the knowledge. It's about the mindset, the way you approach people and situations." I nodded, recognizing the same epiphany I'd experienced years ago. Nursing wasn't just a career, it was a calling, a commitment to seeing people, not just their illnesses or injuries but their humanity, and meeting them where they were. "I'm proud of you," I said simply. "Mom would be too." Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, her voice steady. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Olivia. For trusting me even after everything." "It's not about trust," I replied. "It's about choice. You chose to take responsibility for your actions, to repay what was taken, and to build something better. That's what matters." We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee and watching the sun set over the city skyline. In that moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The wounds of the past hadn't disappeared. They never would, but they had begun to heal, leaving space for new growth, new connections, new possibilities. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I noticed a small envelope tucked into the corner of my dresser. Inside was another letter from Mom, dated just days before she died. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places, but her words were as clear as ever. "My dearest Olivia," it began, "if you're reading this, then everything has played out as I feared it might. Diana's true nature has been revealed, and you've had to be stronger than any daughter should need to be. But I hope you've also discovered something else." Tears blurred my vision as I read on. Mom wrote about the importance of creating space for others to grow, of choosing healing over destruction, of trusting in the quiet voices that often have the most important things to say. She reminded me of why I'd chosen nursing, not because it was easy but because it was meaningful. And she reassured me that the safeguards she'd put in place weren't meant to control me, but to support me. "Even after I'm gone," she wrote, "I will find a way to help you fight the battles that need fighting." By the time I finished reading, my cheeks were wet with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of gratitude. Because in that moment I understood something profound. Mom hadn't left me alone. She'd given me everything I needed to carry on her legacy, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. The next morning I arrived at the hospital early, eager to dive back into work. Between managing the scholarship fund, mentoring new nurses, and caring for patients, my schedule was busier than ever. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel overwhelmed. Instead, I felt purposeful. As I walked through the halls, I couldn't help but notice how much had changed. Not just in my own life, but in the lives of those around me. Dad was reconnecting with old colleagues, rediscovering the joy of collaboration and shared purpose. Amanda was thriving in nursing school, her natural empathy shining through in every patient interaction. Even the scholarship recipients were blossoming, their dreams fueled by the opportunities Mom's fund provided. And then there was me, standing in the middle of it all, carrying Mom's torch, building on the foundation she'd laid. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the weight of responsibility threatened to crush me. But I knew I wasn't alone. Mom's voice was always there, guiding me, reminding me of why this work mattered. That afternoon, as I sat in a meeting with the hospital board to discuss expanding the scholarship program, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Amanda. "Can we talk? It's important." I excused myself from the meeting and stepped into the hallway. Amanda stood at the end of the corridor, her expression serious. For a moment I worried that she'd changed her mind, that the pressure of living up to Mom's expectations had become too much. "What is it?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then held out a folded piece of paper. "I found this in one of Mom's old journals," she said. "I think you should read it." I unfolded the paper and scanned the contents. It was a long detailed inventory of every asset, every investment, every property Mom had acquired over the years. Beside each item was a note explaining its purpose: funding for nursing scholarships, grants for medical research, resources for underserved communities. At the bottom of the page, in Mom's unmistakable handwriting, was a single sentence: *, true strength isn't about taking, it's about giving. *. I looked up at Amanda, my throat tight with emotion. "Where did you find this?" "In the storage unit where Mom kept her things," she replied. "I thought it might help with whatever comes next." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached out and hugged her, holding her close as the weight of Mom's legacy settled over us both. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about justice. It was about building something lasting, something that would continue to heal and uplift long after we were gone. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to take on the challenge. The hospital corridors were quieter than usual as I walked toward the pediatric wing, Amanda trailing behind me. It had been 6 months since Diana's downfall, and while life had settled into a new rhythm, the echoes of what had happened still lingered in subtle ways. But those echoes weren't just reminders of pain. They were also signs of healing. Amanda had started shadowing me on evenings when her nursing classes allowed it, eager to learn more about the profession she'd once dismissed. At first, I wasn't sure how much she'd stick with it. After all, nursing wasn't glamorous or easy. But something had shifted in her during those months following the revelation of Diana's fraud. She no longer seemed content to coast through life on privilege alone. Instead, she was determined to carve out her own path, one that aligned with Mom's values, even if she didn't fully realize it yet. "Ready?" I asked as we approached the room where my young patient, Sophie, lay recovering from surgery. Sophie was 8 years old, with bright green eyes and a mop of curly brown hair that framed her face like a halo. She reminded me so much of myself at her age: curious, resilient, and stubbornly hopeful despite everything. "I think so," Amanda replied, though her voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. This was her first time interacting directly with a patient, and I could tell she wanted to make a good impression, not just on me but on herself. We stepped inside, and Sophie immediately lit up. "Nurse Olivia!" she exclaimed, sitting up slightly in bed. Her foreline tugged gently against her arm, but she barely seemed to notice. "Are you here to check my vitals again?" "That's right," I said with a smile, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "But I brought someone special with me today. This is Amanda. She's learning how to be a nurse too." Sophie tilted her head, studying Amanda with the kind of unfiltered curiosity only children possess. "Do you like giving shots?" she asked bluntly. Amanda blinked, caught off guard by the question. Then she laughed softly, shaking her head. "Not yet. But maybe one day." As I went through Sophie's routine checks, Amanda watched intently, asking thoughtful questions whenever there was a pause. By the end of the visit, Sophie had declared Amanda an honorary member of her hospital fan club, which apparently consisted of anyone who promised to bring her chocolate pudding cups next time they visited. When we finally left the room, Amanda exhaled deeply, leaning against the wall outside. "That was intense," she admitted, running a hand through her hair. "I mean, I've read about patient care in textbooks, but actually being there, it's different." "It always is," I replied. "You can study all the procedures and protocols, but none of that prepares you for the moments when someone looks at you and trusts you to help them feel better. That's what makes nursing hard, and worth it." Amanda nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Mom never understood that. She thought it was just about tasks, about doing what doctors told you to do. But it's not, is it?" "No," I said firmly. "It's about connection. About showing up when people need you most, even if you don't have all the answers." Later that evening, after Amanda headed home, I found myself back in Mom's old study. The space had become a sanctuary of sorts, a place where I could reflect on everything that had happened and everything that still lay ahead. On the desk sat the stack of applications for the next round of scholarships, each one filled with stories of hope, determination, and dreams deferred. As I sifted through them, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. Not just Amanda and me, but everyone touched by Mom's legacy. The Catherine Mitchell Memorial Hall had become a beacon of opportunity, drawing aspiring nurses from across the country. and the scholarship fund itself had grown exponentially, thanks to Diana's restitution and the renewed interest generated by media coverage of the legal proceedings. But it wasn't just about numbers or statistics. It was about impact. The lives changed, the futures shaped, the ripple effects of Mom's vision spreading farther than any of us could have imagined. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Dad. Asterisk, can we meet tomorrow? There's something I want to show you. Asterisk. I texted back a quick confirmation, curious about what he might have planned. Over the past few months, our relationship had deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. We spent hours talking about Mom, her career, her passions, the things she believed in most fiercely. Through those conversations, I began to see glimpses of the man she'd fallen in love with. Compassionate, driven, and endlessly curious about the world around him. The next morning, Dad met me at the hospital cafe, a thick folder tucked under his arm. He looked unusually excited, his eyes bright with anticipation. What's this? I asked as he slid into the seat across from me. A project, he replied, opening the folder to reveal a series of blueprints and architectural renderings. Something your mother inspired me to start working on. I scanned the documents, my breath catching as I realized what they represented. Plans for a state-of-the-art nursing education center, complete with simulation labs, classrooms, and community outreach programs. At the top of the page, written in bold letters, was the name Catherine Mitchell Center for Nursing Excellence. This is incredible, I murmured, tracing the design with my fingers. But why now? Dad smiled, his expression softening. Because I finally understand what your mother meant when she said true strength isn't about taking. It's about giving. For years, I let Diana convince me that prestige and titles mattered more than anything else. But watching you carry on her legacy, seeing Amanda embrace this path too, it's made me realize that the best way to honor her memory is to build something lasting. Something that helps others grow. Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at him. She would have loved this. She already does, he said simply. In a way, she's been guiding us all along. Over the next several weeks, the planning for the center became a family effort. Amanda threw herself into designing the mentorship program, drawing on her experiences shadowing me at the hospital. Dad worked tirelessly to secure funding and partnerships with local universities and healthcare organizations. Even Marcus got involved, helping navigate the legal and logistical challenges of launching such an ambitious project. Through it all, I felt Mom's presence more strongly than ever. In the quiet moments between meetings, in the laughter shared over coffee, in the collective determination to create something meaningful. Her voice was there, whispering encouragement, reminding us why this work mattered. The groundbreaking ceremony took place on a crisp autumn morning, the air filled with the scent of falling leaves and fresh possibilities. As I stood beside Dad and Amanda, looking out at the crowd gathered to celebrate the occasion, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for Mom's foresight, for the lessons she'd taught us, and for the second chances we'd been given. This is just the beginning, Dad said, raising his glass during the reception that followed. Your mother believed in building bridges, not walls. Today we take another step toward making that vision a reality. Amanda raised her glass too, her smile radiant. To Mom, she said softly. And to the future she helped create. To Mom, I echoed, feeling her spirit surround us like a warm embrace. As the sun set over the city skyline, casting golden light across the faces of friends, colleagues, and strangers united by a shared purpose, I knew we were exactly where we were meant to be. Not just carrying on Mom's legacy but expanding it, making it stronger, brighter, more inclusive. Because that's what true strength looks like. Not tearing others down but lifting them up. Not holding on to anger but choosing forgiveness. Not clinging to the past but building toward the future. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who mattered most, I felt Mom's final words resonate deep within me. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or grand gestures, but in the ability to be there when someone needs you. We were doing exactly that, honoring her memory by continuing to heal, to connect, to give. And in doing so, we were ensuring that her legacy would endure, long after we were gone.